Hi, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. I had two videos that I was going to shoot here today and tomorrow. But the first one was going to be human depravity in the world today and in an SHTF situation. But I've already put up a couple that weren't particularly uplifting, so I thought that might be a little bit too much and make people think I was going to a real dark place, which I'm not, and don't want to. I want to, we deal with a lot of things that are serious. We deal with things that are life threatening and things, but I don't like to go uh, down that whirlpool, into deep and dark and scary porn and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm going to fold that into, or try to see how well I do. Try to fold that into the importance of learning and mastering combatives. This was precipitated by a couple of things that happened just a couple of days ago. I had a new person come to me and ask if I would train them. I don't train people anymore for the most part. When I do, it's individually. I don't do it for money, and it's only if a person can convince me that they are doing it for the right reason. First off, I have a reason for doing it. Um, will be responsible uh, with and for the things that they learn. And I have a pretty good talk with them on these things. I explain that I feel a responsibility for the effects that my students have on the world around them and the people that may come across their path in the future. And I won't teach anybody that I don't think is going to have a positive effect on their world, because I see that as a reflection on me, and so they kind of have to convince me about this. This person did has so far. It's always a process. Things can go either way at any time. But for now, this person, who happens to be a young woman, has convinced me that she is in it for the right reason, and that she's going to give the proper attention and energy to it, and so I have agreed to begin teaching her. It's interesting that I've always kind of enjoyed teaching females, and it's not, not for that. Um, they are now, a good female student is not better than a good male student, but anybody who's ever taught martial arts on a large scale, which I never did it on a large scale, but I did it, in classes and things. Will know that you have a lot of people coming to it for the wrong reasons, and for the most part, you have a higher percentage of guys coming to it for the wrong reasons. They come to it for ego, or because movies that they've seen, and I'll probably do a separate one on this, on how ego is probably one of the biggest killers of learning that there is. So a lot of times, when you are dealing with young men, unless you're in a strict situation like, a military situation, or a police recruit situation or something like that, um, you have to get through that. You have to deal with them, and very often when you deal with them, they run off because they're offended and their ego is bruised, and they want to go off to find somebody that will stroke them and let them continue to think that they're the you know real bad guy that watching all these movies has made them. Women aren't like that for the most part. There are some who are, but for the most part, women come to it without an idea that they know everything, and so they listen, and they listen, and they do what they're taught, and a good female student is, in the past, have been among my best students, except for those guys who were really committed, or training to fight, or things like that. So anyway, That's a long, drawn-out explanation of what we're getting into, but it's just the way my thoughts led me at the moment. Well, so I have agreed to teach this new student. Well, just like the next day, I was talking to a friend of mine who is a former sheriff of a county just south of here, and we were swapping stories. I was telling him about a kind of it's one of those, it's funny now, but it wasn't then kind of things. When I was bringing a prisoner back from Missouri State Pen down in Jeff City. I told him it was the most nervous I'd ever been in the years on the job, and I won't get into it here. Maybe someday I will. But that got us to trading some stories, and we ended up talking about a guy with whom we were both familiar, and I had a kind of an ancillary contact with him. He was with a motorcycle club around the area, and we had talked about him because he had been executed down at Missouri State Pen. Well, we started talking about this particular case, and like I say, I wasn't a lead officer on it or anything. It was a case in which this bike gang, and I might interject this. When I was in uniform, I had two motorcycle clubs, 1% clubs, that had their clubhouses in my district, and I knew them fairly well, and I got along with them, and they weren't. I'll be honest with you, a lot of them were good guys. They had a different lifestyle than many other people, but they weren't. If they came into the drive-in that you were getting your hamburger at with your family, you weren't going to have to worry about them. There was another group that was different than that, and this guy that I'm talking about was from that group. They had to make a long story short, as they say, they had kidnapped a young woman, taken her to a house, raped her and tortured her all night before strangling her to death in the morning. And I'm just giving the kind of the skimming over the top of that. The details of the case were horrible. They are far beyond what the average person would want to hear, let alone be able to imagine. It's the kind of case that makes cops drink and not talk about their job when they go home, and then causes them problems later on. And there's probably some of you out there that know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into that case in detail, but it reminded me of a case. Now, my case happened much before this other case. It's like a case that was fairly famous. It was the murders of a young couple in Knoxville, and this is back, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that. A young couple, and I hope I get their names right. It was a young lady named Shannon Christian and her boyfriend named Christopher Newsom. Excuse me. Let me get a sip here from my Second Amendment cup. Sorry, I don't like to drink on camera usually, but maybe I should. I'm going to put the link to that down here for those of you who might want to read a bit about it. They were abducted by a group. They were taken to a house. They were tortured in unbelievable ways, both of them, all night long. And the way that they were killed was beyond what I want to describe, especially the young lady. When I talk to people about the importance of knowing how to defend yourself, most people don't understand how important it is, regardless of how I try to explain it. Most people have no idea. Most normal people, okay, I'll put it that way, and most of you out there are normal, okay? There are some of us who are abnormal. for whatever reason, uh, our life choices put us in positions to deal with these things. And so we have a different outlook. We see way beneath the surface of that thin veneer of civility in which most people live most of their lives. Fortunately, most people are able to live an entire life without anything horrible happening to them, or even having happened to anybody that they're closely associated with. And so the idea that horrible things happen is a little bit foreign to them. When I used to teach and give seminars to large groups, especially self-defense for women seminars, one of the first things that I would tell them is that, because let me back up just a bit. One of the ways that a lot of people sold these self-defense classes was by using figures, many of them phony figures, about how many women are sexually assaulted. Okay. And they'd put up their flyers. 30% of women are sexually, or 75% of women are sexually assaulted through, in some time in their life. And they use parameters and measurements that inflate these figures so that they include almost anything in the world, which gives it a miscolored perception of this. One of the first things that I would say when I got up in front of a group was that I don't know how many or what percentage of women, or anybody, but it just happened to be with women, are sexually assaulted during their lifetimes, and I don't care. And usually when I'd say that, I'd hear this gasp coming from the room, but I'd explain, it's not that I don't care about the assaults or the people to whom they happen. It's that it doesn't matter what percentage it happens to, because it happens to 100% of the ones it happens to. And the results are dramatic and life-changing. And they're life-changing not just for the victim, for the immediate victim, but for everybody associated with them. It will affect the rest of their life. It'll affect their marriages, their children. It will ripple through every life that touches them. And that's why it's important to understand the severity of the results of personal attacks. So that's just kind of bringing up the background of where I'm coming from on this. When I teach combatives, I teach, and I should use that, I should explain that term too. I know the military uses the term combatives to describe mainly hand-to-hand combat, and that's fine. That's what it is. When I teach people, I take them, what I consider combatives, I take them everything from hand-to-hand through environmental weapons, through edged weapons, through some other kind of strange weapons, all the way to firearms. Anything that enables you to come out on top in a personal combat situation. So when I'm sorry, I just kind of lost my train of thought there, because I'm now off onto another tangent that I'm trying to get back from. So when I explain to people the importance of learning combatives, learning to be able to defend themselves, it's difficult for the average person to understand the importance of it, because they don't have an understanding of the horrors and the violence of true personal attacks. And this is why I was going to call that other one human depravity, because the things that humans can do to each other, the things that bad people can do to others, are beyond the understanding or even imagination of the normal person. In one way, this is good, because there's a lot of that stuff that you don't need to be carrying around in your head. But in another way, it's not so good, but because it keeps you from really understanding the things from which you are trying to defend yourself, and which means that you may not have a true and total understanding of the importance of your training and training right and getting good at the skills and the mindset and a whole lot of things that go into it to be able to defend yourself against attack situation, against threats. I had a couple that I put out some time ago. I think one was called The Nature of Threats. Another was called The Three Enemies. I'm not going to get into that right now. But I probably will later on. This is the main thing that I wanted to say here is that as horrible as things happen now, it would get, I don't know how many times, 10, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times more horrible if society collapses or we had a total meltdown or whatever, when the rule of law is no longer a deterrent. And there's some places it's not a deterrent at all, even now. But when it's no longer a deterrent, that veneer of civility vanishes, and the average person has no idea of the evil and the animalistic types of people that are out there. Even when I try to explain to people how dangerous the world can be, I'll get a couple of different reactions. First is, I don't want to hear about it. Oh, nothing's going to happen. That's another one. Oh, nothing's going to happen. You just worry too much, right? The other is, oh, I know all about how bad the world is. I know about it. And most people don't watch the news anymore, right? And so they don't have any idea even what's going on in their own city. And they'd be shocked to find out. And when I try to explain to them what is happening or what is happening beneath that level that they don't see, after a couple of minutes, I'll see that their eyes are starting to glaze over, and they don't want to hear it, and I can see that I'm not getting through to them at all, but they are just sure that they know how bad the world is when they don't have a clue. The point of this now, I'm I'm going to, this is kind of an introduction. As a part of something for my student to refer to, and other people, anybody else who is interested, I'm going to be doing a series on some of the aspects of combatives that I'm going to put on Patreon. I'm not going to put it here. This is really not for people who just kind of wander by and think it'll be fun to watch. I want to make sure that the people who look at it are the more serious and the ones who would go to Patreon. But the purpose of this is to throw out there that the idea that it's important to tune yourself in, to kind of understand, to make sure that you understand how dangerous this world can be, even though you get through most every day without anything bad happening. Again, like I say to those groups, it doesn't matter how many people it doesn't happen to. It happens to 100% of the people that it does happen to. That may sound funny, but it is so horrible, the horrors. And if you read this article down here that I'm going to put the link to about Christan Newsom, realize that even the horrible things that you will read don't begin to describe the true horrors that weren't reported. There are horrors in this world beyond which the average person, or the extent of which the average person can't imagine. But it's important to understand that they do. And it's important to prepare yourself to be able to deal with that. Not just if society collapses, but right now. And if you were tuned in to what happens in the cities, and it doesn't just happen in the cities, these things can happen out in the rural areas too, occasionally, but they happen all the time in the cities. And they don't just happen to people who live in the cities. They happen to people who visit the cities, who are who are driving through the city to go see a show, to go see somebody, and they get a flat tire. And guess what? The next person who comes along wasn't a nice person, and then really bad things happen. So understand the importance. Understand the importance of recognizing, of realizing, of understanding that this world can be worse than you would ever imagine, and that you should prepare yourself for it. You have a responsibility to prepare yourself for that. And you have a responsibility not to yourself, just to yourself, but to everybody in your life, to all those who depend on you, all those who love you. God gave you this life. He doesn't mind if you protect it. But if you think you can protect it with good wishes and happy thoughts, you're wrong. And the ability to dispense violence sometimes as you're on the way, directed application of force, violently executed, is what will enable you to survive a personal attack situation if you're ever in it. So that's my happy message for today. The world can be a violent place, and if you're not prepared to deal with it, things can go bad, right? So consider, if you're not already in it, and I'll answer some more. I might make another one about this. I'm not a proponent of the martial arts as they have been taught. I taught martial arts, but the way that they're taught today is not what you want, and I'll do a separate one on that. But I guess I'll leave it at that and just say realize how important it is. Realize, again, that it's your responsibility as everything else is, and consider. You can watch some more of mine. You can go get some training. I'll put on here some things that I recommend. I don't know everybody in the country. I don't know very many in the country anymore. I haven't kept up on it, but I'll probably get some information out to you for people who will know, who may be in your area, that would be good to take from, and add that to a part of your preparations, because as we say, it's not just preparing for a horrible future. It's your prep should be preparing you to live a better life today, and that fits into with what we always say, and that is that we prepare well today, right, in order to live well tomorrow. But if we're going to live well tomorrow, we've got to live well today. We've got to get to tomorrow. Okay, so do that for yourself. Do that for the ones you love, and the ones that love you, and the ones who are counting on you. And I think I'll leave it at that and bid you a good day. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.